A new kid came to my class one day. He never talked to anyone, though, so he didn't really have any friends. He just put his head on his desk and moped all day. After a while, I began to wonder about him and decided to talk to him. "You always look so sad." I sat at the desk in front of him. "Is there anything you need to talk about?" He started shaking a little bit when I startled him out of whatever he had been thinking about. But finally he began talking. He said that about a month ago, something really bad happened. He was sitting in his room playing video games when he just happened to look up at his ceiling. He noticed that the board covering the entrance to the attic above his room seemed to have been moved. Darkness was all he could see in the gap, but rather than being scared of what moved the board, he wanted to know what it was. He moved his chair right under the entrance and pulled himself up after grabbing a flashlight to bring with him. When he got upstairs, he was surprised at just how large his attic was. Even with the flashlight, it looked as if the darkness spread on forever. He didn't see the walls that enclosed the space he was in, and that piqued his sense of adventure. He walked away from the hole that led to his room and began searching for whatever could have moved the bod. After walking for a while, his flashlight died. He looked around him. View was completely surrounded by the darkness. He got scared and began searching for the way back into his bedroom, but no matter what direction he walked in, he couldn't find the way out. He had already walked far enough that the light leaking in from his bedroom was completely out of sight. He was lost and alone in what should have been just a regular attic. He continued wandering around in search of his bedroom, but because he couldn't see where he was going, he lost track of where he had come from and didn't know which direction he was facing. His fear grew, but he continued walking. He didn't know how long he had been walking when he finally saw a faint light in the distance. Hesped up his pace, sure that it must be the way back home. As he got closer and closer, though, he came to the realization that whatever was emitting the light was most definitely not his bedroom. When he got close enough to make out what it was, he saw that it was a town. He wasn't sure how, but an entire town sat in his attic, and it was large enough to be seen from quite a long ways away. Not knowing where else to go, he went into the village in hopes of finding a way to get home. At this point in the story, he took in a shaky breath and let out a sigh for breaking down into tears. I didn't know what to do, so I tried to comfort him as best I could. Hey, it's okay now." I patted him on the shoulder. "I know it was scary, but look, you're back now. You don't need to cry." He slowly looked up at me, tears still running down his face, but I still hadn't found out how to escape from the village. Somewhere in the vast expanses of our homeland there is a small village inn. Now it is a small village, but before it was a rich village with a church, a school, and a club. Then the young people left, leaving almost only the old people. This story happened many years ago, when my old grandmother Masha was still a girl. On the edge of the village, near the forest, lived an old grandmother, Varvara. The locals said that she was a witch. She treated livestock, told fortunes, cast spells, and helped girls and women get rid of full-fledged pregnancies. Old-timers said that many years ago Varvara, having arrived in the village, worked as a midwife, and then they sent young Komsomol members, a paramedic and a nurse, and Varvara was no longer needed. That's when she started dabbling in magic. It seemed that Varvara helped the villagers, but at the same time they did not like her. She hardly communicated with anyone. Her house was located in the distance, but her garden and vegetable garden aroused envy. Grandma Masha was 11 years old at the time. She and her friends went to Varvara's house to tell fortunes at night. In secret from the mother, of course, otherwise she would have received a rod on the back. The girls brought mushrooms and berries to the witch and asked her to tell fortunes for her betrothed and her fate. At first, Varvara did not want to tell fortunes to the children, but then she accepted the gifts and told everyone's fate and their heirs. She predicted hunger and need for my grandmother, that she would lose all her brothers in a great battle, and it's true, they all died during the war, that she would marry for love, and the children would be good, but everyone would almost disappear because of the snake, apparently green serpent, alcohol. I must admit that the girls were not particularly impressed by the predictions, and they went home dissatisfied. And a couple of months later there was a loss of livestock and the harvest failed. Who is to blame? Of course, they blamed the witch. In vain did the collective farm chairman try to calm the crowd, saying, "We are Soviet people, communists. Why believe in children's fairy tales? The crowd was adamant. The local first guy, Greshka, also threw wood on the fire. He had his own grievance. He loved the chairman's daughter, the beautiful Nastya, and wanted to get married. But the flighty beauty not only refused him and got ready to marry a city man, but also got rid of the witch's spoiled child. The angry crowd went to the witch's house, boarded up the door and windows, covered it with brushwood, and set it on fire. The witch burned down along with the house. Time passed, and rumors began to circulate in the village. The ghost of a grandmother now walked in the place of the witch's house. If you see a ghost, you will be in trouble. If a man sees it, he will die soon. And if a woman sees it, she will lose her child. I don't know whether this is true or not. Only the locals began to avoid the burnt place. A couple of decades later, the witches wanted to build a new club on the site of the house, but the construction did not go well, and on the second day a log fell on a carpenter, and a couple of days later, 2 more construction workers, young guys, drowned in the river. They stopped construction and decided to repair the old club. Thus, another legend appeared that the witch did not allow the club to be built on the site of her house. Then rumors spread that the ghost of a witch walked around the village at night, scaring children and killing livestock. The hunting of the ghost only stopped in the 80s. Then a young guy arrived in the village, who, as it turned out, was an old relative of the witch. Well, they didn't tell him that lynching had been committed against Varvara. They just told him about the fire. He didn't even bother asking. He simply erected a wooden cross on the site of the burnt house. Then he stayed in the village and started a family. Nowadays, the story of the witch is another legend of my beloved village. It's up to you to believe in it or not. This story happened to my friends. In the summer of 2012, we were going to visit an abandoned village, but I couldn't go due to the fact that I was admitted to the hospital with a diagnosis of bronchitis. According to eyewitnesses, no one has lived in this village for more than 30 years because something bothered them in these houses at night. We didn't understand why, and no one wanted to tell us, so we decided to check. What is it that the residents of this village had to leave their homes? I will write on behalf of my friend Kolya. We went on scooters since it was impossible to drive there by car for 2 nights. When we arrived, we saw that the houses were very good and you could live in them. We chose the house where we will spend the night. The first night, everything went well. We were getting ready for bed. In the morning, we went to explore the forest and its surroundings. When we returned, it was already late afternoon. We lit the stoves and were getting ready to have dinner. There were no signs of trouble, and we already thought that there was nothing terrible here. But when suddenly there was a knock on the window, we did not pay any attention to it and continued to eat. Then there was some noise in the attic, as if someone was walking in the attic. I decided to go and check what the noise was about. When I went up to the attic, some creature appeared in front of me. It did not look like an animal or a person. It was something inexplicable. This creature was wearing a torn shirt and torn pants, and there were no boots on his feet at all. I was very scared and did not move. When this creature came at me, I stood motionless. Because I was baptized, it couldn't come close to me, so I carefully went down and closed the attic. When I told my friends about this, they didn't believe me and just laughed. Suddenly knocking began from all sides, on windows and doors. We quickly closed everything and wanted to go to bed, but we couldn't sleep because there were knocking sounds almost all night. The next morning we were very scared and therefore got ready very quickly. When we left the house, we were surprised. There were a lot of tracks around the house, as if a herd of bulls had run through here. Soon we left and returned home and told everyone about it. Early in the morning, Simon woke up from another nightmare. He dreamed of ghosts, witches, maniacs in general, all kinds of otherworldly evil spirits. And once again, having made a promise to himself never again to watch a bunch of low-grade horror films before bed, he took a pack of cigarettes from the nightstand near the bed and went to the balcony. It was July outside, and watching the sunrise on a cool balcony with a cigarette in his mouth seemed like the best way to start his day. It is also worth noting that Simon was not a cowardly guy at all, and on days when he did not have work or important things to do, he liked to hang out with his friends in all sorts of creepy places. It all started with simple abandoned high-rise buildings, but always at night. After all, at night, any shabby, old panel immediately turned into the habitat of all visible and invisible creatures, which in people's imaginations strive to fly out from around the corner and, with a loud, inhuman scream, turn a living person into a piece of bitten and shapeless meat. Nevertheless, everyone, of course, understands that such monsters exist only in their imagination, and therefore this hobby for Simon seemed only an opportunity to safely provoke his subconscious. Then he began to visit places on the outskirts and away from people, but in the end he got tired of abandoned places, abandoned private houses, and even some farms, and so he instructed his friends to find something truly scary and mysterious. And until then, his hobby was frozen. Having lit a cigarette, the guy rested his elbows on the window frame and leaned out a little out of the window, inhaling the fresh, summer air. Thoughts about the nightmare began to recede somewhere deep into the subconscious, and will probably remind themselves the next night. But for now Simon watched as little by little the first rays of the sun began to peek out from behind the horizon and illuminate everything around. The windows begin to glare, and the area near the house emerges from the darkness, turning from a terrible, dark place into a completely ordinary place to his eye. Contemplating this next victory of the world, he did not even notice how the cigarette ran out and the pack turned out to be empty. Returning to the apartment, Simon began to think about what to do with himself. Today was a day off and no work was planned, so roughly speaking, the next few days were only at his disposal. He sat down on the sofa and began to mentally go through possible options until he finally realized that there were no options left and there was no activity to be found. He fell on the sofa, with his arms outstretched, and just started to lie there and stare at the ceiling, when suddenly his phone rang, and Simon instantly jumped up from the sofa, took the phone and answered. "Simon, hi, this is Ian," sounded on the other end. "Hello, well, how do you spend your days without your outings? Honestly, it's crazy boring, man. Did you happen to find anything? I'm just calling to tell you. I dug through websites, archives. So, and the guy's voice instantly came to life and became much happier than in the previous few weeks. "So listen, in general, I just checked a lot of places, and through all this garbage, it seems to me I found something interesting. Are you listening?" Ian deliberately delayed answering, mentally imagining the withdrawal Simon was experiencing now. "Well, don't delay, damn you. Okay, hahaha. In short, there is a village 6 to 7 hours from the city. They say that people from there have never shown anywhere. It's as if there is no one there, and yet the village exists. Wait, well, why hasn't anyone else tried to go there? Of course they tried, but they say that no one else has seen them. Oh, well, some kind of blizzard. I feel like I've read this story 1,000 times. I suppose they also wrote that there are devils in the village, and the ghosts of grandmothers guard their houses, and they knock on the windows at night. Man, I understand how it sounds. Well, if you want, we can go to the next high-rise building, where, according to rumors, there is a ghost." Ian laughed loudly into the phone. "No, really. Okay, let's go to this village and check what's going on." With these words, the guy hung up and went to the closet. "So you need to take things that are more comfortable, a bag for food and small items." A message came to the phone. "Be ready in 3 hours." Simon managed to go to the store, buy canned goods, cigarettes, and even a couple of bottles of beer back, in case the village turned out to be a simple outback with a population of 2 grandmothers and 1.5 grandfathers. At home, he put his phone and portable charger on charge, and then lay down to wait for the car. He had already begun to fall asleep and, half asleep, again began to see some strange creatures, but his dreams were interrupted by a loud ringtone. "Yes, hello. Come on out. This is the 3rd time I've called." "Oh yes, sorry, I'm already running." And quickly grabbing all his things, Simon ran out of the driveway to the old car where Ian and Ben were sitting. This was their main group for such night outings. Everyone is about 20, and everyone uses them to have fun and relax. Jumping into the back seat of the car, Simon immediately heard Ben laugh at where they were going, and also laughed, and Ian turned to the window offended. The guys calculated how much they would spend on gasoline and transfer the money to Ben's card, and he, in turn, started a car. Well, I set off. For the first half hour of the trip, everyone exchanged expectations for the upcoming research. Yes, I'm telling you it's true. It's even in the archives. Ian zealously defended this village and his choice. "Well, let's see. If you remember anything, you'll give me a bottle of whiskey. Yes, yes, be more serious. And both guys laughed. Simon turned to Ben, showing several bottles in his bag. Wow, it will be possible to consider this not an outing, but a vacation in nature, said the guy, who instantly became as happy as an elephant. The guys talked for a while about various topics, and eventually Simon and Ian fell asleep, leaving Ben alone with the road and his favorite tapes from the 90s. He had nightmares again. Too often. He was already starting to get tired of them. But where can you get away from the strange games of your subconscious? But a voice suddenly began to make its way through the dream. Hey, Sonyu, come on, get up already. We've arrived. Opening his eyes with difficulty, Simon rose from his lying position and, nodding to Ben, looked out the window. Where? At home. We have to walk. I won't drive my car over these bumps, so come on, one or two, get up. Simon took the bag and got out of the car. Ian was already standing on the street. A day. And how far do we have to go here? Yawning, Simon turned to his friend. Well, give or take 30 minutes. Okay, will you smoke? Ian nodded affirmatively, and Simon handed him a cigarette. Share with the driver too, sleeping beauties. Ben shouted from the car with a laugh and also took a cigarette from the pack. What a parasite you! All three clung to different windows and concluded that there were no people there, although everything inside looked quite civilized. So maybe we can go inside, suggested by Ben. Fell from the oak tree. What if some old lady there sees us and has a heart attack? That's also true. Well, what to do then? God bless. Glory to everyone. At home, he turned on the lights everywhere, turned on the TV, turned on the music, and did everything to distract himself, but in vain. Every time he closed his eyes, this face appeared in front of him. His dead friends appeared, but despite this, he was happy. He was immensely grateful to God that he survived. Until there was a knock on the window of his apartment, followed by hysterical laughter.